Welcome to I Could Talk to You All Day. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, recovering workaholic, perfectionist, and people pleaser.
And I'm John Spears, emerging from playing small, getting caught up in the inertia of life, and always being on.
I Could Talk to You All Day is a show for executives and emerging leaders. This is not just another leadership podcast. We're here to talk about what it means to be a leader while also being human.
So join us for raw, vulnerable, and probably pretty funny conversations about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted. Let's get the conversation started.
John Spears.
Hey, Lauren Lefkowitz, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I got my hat on backwards. I feel really ready for this conversation today. It's good to see you. It's good to be able to have another one of our conversations.
Yes. Your backwards hat makes me feel ready for this conversation as well, because you don't usually wear your hat backwards.
I don't. I feel like I don't know where this is coming from, but I feel like I'm like going to be thrown into like a basketball game and I have to like get ready for it. So like I'm preparing myself to get on the court and practice what we're talking about today. And yeah, I'm ready.
There is never any danger of me asking you to play a sport with me. The one time I ran across my living room, I broke both of my shoulders, and that's all of my experience with sports. So help me out on that.
Okay, done.
But you prove a nice point, which is about choice, and leads into our topic for today. We're going to talk about change today, which is ever-present situation, I think, in all of our lives. And there are kind of two ways that change happens. One is that the world comes at us, right? And the other is that we proactively choose to do something different. So today we're going to really focus on the world coming at us. And the world is coming at us, right? They're in the job market. My gosh, I've been hearing recently about more layoffs, ghost jobs, which is a new term which for something that's always been happening, which is where companies are posting jobs they don't intend to fill because they want to look like they're growing for their investors, or they want to convince the teams internally that they're trying to hire, but they're not getting candidates. And
I mean, that just sounds like a really bad thing to do.
It's a horrible, unethical thing to do. But meanwhile, each job is getting 300 to 500 applications in 24 hours. So it's a crazy world out there. And so let's set the stage for what we're going to focus on today. And I want to turn it over to you, John, and ask you to set the stage for change. And you were talking before we started recording about all the change that's going on in your life and what that's doing for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think each of us has a very different relationship with change. Some of us love change and thrive under it. Some of us are really challenged with change. For me, I love change, but I'm also very conflicted with change because I like to be in control. I like to know what's happening. I like to live in the known. I like to be very prepared. I'm an Enneagram 6, which is like, I see the world as a fundamentally like challenging place, and I thrive and I seek safety and security. And so I think for someone like me, the past 4 or 5 years has been very challenging when you think about all the fundamental changes that have happened. A very dramatic change in the US and in our government and our political system. We've had COVID, there's a war in Ukraine, systems are changing, technology is changing. We have self-driving cars, we have AI emerging in a new way that's fundamentally shifting and changing the way we work. And while that's some of that stuff anyway is super exciting and interesting, it really kind of shakes the foundation for a lot of us. And I think particularly for those of us that are leaders, when we're thinking about what's happening in our organizations, lots of change there. Job market is shifting, strategy is shifting. I work in a nonprofit as a COO. And so thinking about how is our fundraising model working and shifting, how are donors' priorities shifting, and what is the impact on us as an organization? How do we plan for that? So it just seems to me that there is an elevated kind of experience of change. Things seem to be, not only for me in my personal life, but I think culturally and broader in society, like the pace of change is really shifting in a way that is constantly putting us outside of our comfort zone if we want to excel and make an impact and influence and be leaders.
Or even just not drown.
or even just not drown. Totally.
Right. Yeah. To like get some level of balance where you're at least swimming on the water.
Yeah.
And not, treading to try to just keep your breathing holes open. Right. When you just talked about how the world is right now, like it made my heart pound a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not that it's different. The world is in constant change. It just seems louder to me in recent times. And, I got this image of the whack-a-mole game. Do you remember that arcade game where it's like a thing pops up and if you try to catch up to it, you put the giant hammer down on it. And so like already too late. We're already on to something else, right? Your marketing job is being replaced by ChatGPT and like, you have to figure out how to overcome that. You have to figure out how to stay afloat and really do more than survive, right? We are born to thrive. We are born to create and be filled with joy. And it's hard to sometimes when all of that stuff is coming at you. I don't usually point to two choices in things. I love to talk about a spectrum, but it almost feels like you have two choices.
Mm-hmm.
You can like get hit by the waves and just like hope you can do stuff, or you can see the waves coming and decide how you want to react to them. I'm really carrying this analogy far or metaphor. I still don't really understand analogy versus metaphor. Don't tell my mom, she's a grammarian.
I think if I can just offer my not so my non-expertise on grammar, I think it's an analogy is when you use like or as, and a metaphor is when you just say it is something. I think
a simile is when you use like.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. See, I'm putting it out there. I'm practicing in this.
An analogy is when you compare like one thing to another, but a metaphor is like replacing one thing with another. I'm not really sure. Anyway, this might not make it into the episode because I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know this.
No, we need to keep it in there. We are humans. I'm okay showing all my cards that I'm not would you call it a grammatarian?
Grammarian. Yeah. What's funny is like, if we get emails about this episode, it will probably be the explanation of the grammar question that we have, because people who love grammar, and I do love grammar.
Me too.
People who love grammar are going to be like, I know how to explain this in layperson's terms. So bring it on. Give us an email. I could talk to you all day at gmail.com. Anyway, back to the topic of the day. So we get to decide, right? I see this sort of binary choice of like, do I react and choose what I want out of the situation that's been handed to me, or do I just like sort of go along with whatever everybody else is telling me to do? And where I see the spectrum, and I'd love your perspective on this too, but where I see the spectrum is how much, right? So if one end then of the binary is I do nothing, and the other end is I do everything I possibly can, then the spectrum is like, how much choice do you make? And how much do you sort of float along with what's happening? What are your thoughts on that?
The first thing that comes to mind is that you get to choose, right? Like, I think the most amazing thing that I've learned through coaching, both through being coached and having a coach, going through a coach training program, and now coaching others is that the coachee or us as humans, we get to choose how we want to respond. And so when thinking about that spectrum, I mean, for me, I'll tell you how I respond. I have like an all or nothing context on a lot of things. So currently in my life, I am choosing all the change, right? I'm like all in on change. I'm a little like underwater. I'm kind of feeling a little overwhelmed with it. But that's sort of my natural kind of my automatic response. A lot of times I recognize that it's probably not the best way in serving me and what I'm doing. But I think there's real power in acknowledging that on that spectrum, we get to choose. We get to choose if we want the inertia of life just to take us forward and not make lots of change. And we get to choose all the change if we want to. And I think that really is super dependent on the individual and on the kind of life that they want to live. And for me, I really want to live outside my comfort zone. I am so tired of playing small. I'm so tired of the boring kind of life that I was living before, which is to keep me safe and protected and in the known and secure, that I really am looking to like get out of myself and to live the life I've really always imagined, which is a life of thriving and of energy and of learning and of impact. And for me, super personal, this is how I'm going about that. And so I just think this is like, I think there's like a fundamental question, which is like self-awareness, like being aware of what you want and what you need and trusting yourself to make the choice that serves you best in the moment, because that will also change. There are different times in our lives where we're going to make different choices, and it's not like a static decision. It's very dynamic based on the circumstance, where we are. I think another part of this is like our battery level. Like, is our battery full? Are we able to be resilient? What's the kind of even our capacity for our battery? If the capacity for our battery is very low, we might need to play it safe for a little bit until we can kind of recharge our battery and increase our capacity for change and resiliency and ability to navigate uncertainty, which, like, for me, seems like that's happening more and more every day. So the importance of well-being and taking care of myself and like prioritizing myself has been really important the past few months.
Ooh, you just said so much juicy stuff. One of the things you just said was that you have to choose the thing that serves you best.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when change comes at us, if we're high achieving, if we are have any aspect of people pleasing, we forget to serve ourselves. And we have this notion that we have to take care of our people, our team, our manager, our company, our family, what does everybody else around me need? Oh my gosh, this change is coming at me. How do I protect everybody around me? And you just said so importantly, like, what is your battery level?
Mm-hmm.
How do you choose to take care of you? And then you said before that you're in choice, right? We always have choices, and we forget that because a change is coming at us. We have to react and respond to it. And we have this automatic way of being, right? Which we talked about when we talked about comfort zones. We talked about it when we talked about survival mechanisms. We have this like automatic go-to of how we do. And we forget that we get to choose. And one of the most infuriating things my coach has said to me, and that I've said to my clients as well, is if you say so. Because we make up the truth, right? We create a truth. This is happening to me. Your wedding is coming up. You're getting laid off. You got promoted. Somebody on your team left. Your boss left, right? There's all kinds of life events and career events that just happen. And then we have to decide how to react. We think we have to whatever, right?
Yep.
My have to in the past was anytime a leader left, I assumed it was my responsibility to step in and interim manage.
Mm-hmm.
If I say so, right? Like, there was no particular reason. I wasn't the executive vice president of all company executives. I was the VP of HR. There was no reason why I was expected to step in as interim manager. But I decided that was the truth. I decided that was my expectation of me, and that was the company's expectation of me. And so I did. So I raised my hand, and I had about 12 different positions while I was at that company. Because I thought that was what I needed. My battery was so low.
Yeah.
So all the time I was running on almost empty all the time. And so how do you, when you think of like all the choices that are coming at you, right? And all of the changes that are happening around you that you have to make decisions on or make no decision on, right? Like not deciding is a decision as well. How do you balance your own battery?
I don't think I always do a great job at that. As you were talking, I wrote something down that I wanted to share that I'm really, frankly, afraid to share because I think I'm afraid of what it says about me. So, and I'll share because I think this relates to your question is, for me, the capacity of my battery has changed dramatically since COVID, right? Since 2020, my ability to like be on all the time and to be an effective extrovert all the time and to deal with change has frankly decreased a lot. And I've been thinking a lot about that. What does that say about me? Does that impact my ability to lead? How effective I am as a leader? Am I capable of doing some of these things? And so I think for me, that question of like, how do I respond? How do I make sure that my battery and everything, it really, I think for me, the first step is awareness, being aware of where you are and accepting what is. We talk about this and joke about this. Like we both hate this, like, what is question, because it's like, it really just sort of puts it out there and it's triggering for me because it's like, I don't know, very confrontational for me in some ways. It's good, but it's also confrontational. But to like accept what is for me the first step in being able to assess what kind of decision I'm able to make. I can't make decisions now based on my 2019 self. I need to make base decisions and how I'm going to respond based on what's happening now and what my battery level's out. I'm not sure. I don't know why this is. I don't know if it's because I'm 3 years older. I'm in my early 40s. My energy level is changing. I don't know if the pandemic completely just wrecked me. And I think that's probably what it is. Just sort of my ability to be resilient. There's so much there that I think I'm slowly building myself up. But I think to your specific question, it's being aware where we are. And then from an empowered place, from a place that's going to actually serve us, making a choice on how to respond. As a leader of an organization and as the owner of my own coaching practice, I'm constantly having to make those kinds of decisions. And I think I am more and more confident in them because I'm more rooted in myself as opposed to externally kind of people pleasing or validation from other people. I'm really thinking about where I am, what's happening in my body, what's happening with my energy level, and from that place, making a choice. So again, I think it's super personal, but it really starts with awareness and acceptance. One of the things with change that I'm constantly dealing with and helping my team and family and others deal with is change is happening. Change is like the only thing that's consistent. And if we resist that, if there's this constant resistance and this tension around change, we're expending so much energy to resist, and we're not putting energy in a place that could be effective to help us manage and thrive, even in uncertainty, even in the unknown, even in change.
Yeah. The point about resistance is, and what is, I love hate that, that question. It feels so open-ended to me. And then it makes me so angry that what is whatever we make up, right?
Totally.
Like there aren't that many facts out there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But you said you were talking about the pandemic and it changing your level of resilience against all the things, right? But I think what the pandemic actually did was it knocked down the walls of normalcy.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. We can all just go home and work from home and be successful that way. And not that the effects of the pandemic were in any way like welcomed, right? It's been a really hard 3+ years now, in a lot of ways. And also, oh, we don't have to go to the office at 8:30. Count our commute as not work time. Count that as personal time. Leave the office at 7:00 at night. Try to squeeze in dinner, go home and open our laptops, and then work a little bit more. Right? Like those of us who got used to that kind of life saw a different way that came at us. It was change that nobody chose. And now we're like, I don't really want to go back to that. This way works for me now. Now I'm not in the car for 20 minutes each way or 2 hours each way or whatever it is, or depending on traffic, somewhere between 20 minutes and 2 hours. And so our tolerance level, I think, changed even more than our capability levels for all of the BS of like that things just are this way because that's how the work world is. There is no that's how it is anymore. And on the one hand, that's really cool. On the other hand, it's like this chaotic amusement park ride, right? Do you remember that amusement park ride where they put you in a cylinder and they spun it around and you were stuck to the wall?
Gravitron. Oh my God. I was just thinking that as you were talking, as you started to talk about this ride, that is the first thing that I thought about. And it's called the Gravitron. And I hated it because I almost always puked after it. But I loved when the seat went up because it was going so fast.
Okay, so not surprisingly, I would have been holding your stuff while you went on the ride. I was the stuff holder at amusement parks. But there was always one teenager who came off the ride and they were like, I wasn't stuck to the wall. And they're freaking out because they weren't stuck enough to the wall. So they felt like the chaos, right? And so it's almost like if we metaphor this or analogy this, it's like the whole world's been stuck against this wall, right? Yeah. And then one of us is sticking an arm out and saying oh, I can choose to go this way instead. I don't have to just react to exactly how things are. And I think a lot of us are in this place now where we can continue along on this ride and go however it's going, or we can stand up and choose, right? And decide. And that's a lot of where I see you right now in your life. And I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, that there's a lot happening in your career and your life and your family and all of that is just in change. And you're choosing how to be with all of that. Can you talk about that a little?
Yes. We've talked over the past year. I have been in major choice, and I have made choices that have gotten me out of my comfort zone and into the direction that I want to go in my life, in the direction of my dream life, what I want for myself, for my family. And I think oftentimes we talk about choice as we make the choice once and it just magically is great and it happens. But I think for me, and we've also talked about choices have consequences, good and bad. And I'm making lots of choices that are stretching me in really significant ways. And I am really freaking uncomfortable. That experience that we have where we want to get out of our skin and jump out of our skin. And just I just want everything to be calm and peaceful. That's not happening right now. And I'm constantly making the choice to grow and to learn and to be curious. And we're going to talk about this, I know, soon and maybe another episode. But for me, I've always been someone who in the past has thrived off of being perfect and good and getting gold stars and being head and shoulders above people. There are lots of things that came super easy to me and allowed me to excel in some things. A lot of things not, like math and grammar, really hard for me, really challenging for me. Did not excel in those. But I think for me, I'm constantly making the choice to adapt to change. There is a real desire inside to go back to homeostasis, to go back to the known, to go back to the peace and calm of the inertia of life. And I have spent so much time just going with the flow and allowing weeks and months and years just to go by and not make a choice, or making the choice not to make a choice, that at 42, I recognize there's so much more life that I want to live and so much more that I want to experience. And in order to do that, I need to be someone who is uncomfortable in the inside. I'm also someone naturally who doesn't like to sit with difficult emotions. Like, if there's a conflict, I like to resolve it immediately. If I'm not feeling good inside, I like to figure it out and move through it. And I think that's very easy to do when you're not in motion, or when you're in a floaty going down the river, just sort of letting the flow take you. It's harder in my experience to navigate change and navigate difficult emotions and be able to constantly be making choices to be outside your comfort zone. And I think hands down, the only way that I've been able to do this is because I've had people like you, Lauren, in my life. I've had support. I've had people say, keep on going forward. Let's talk this through. We've talked about how you're the person I call and cry and bawl my eyes out in the airport, or when I'm just not feeling it. I have people that are really there to carry me when I don't have the energy myself to do it. And that is hands down, the only way that I've been able to constantly be able to make a choice to move forward. So thank you. And thanks to everyone else in my life who's been able to be that for me.
Thank you. Yeah. We're starting to dip our toe into the next episode, which is the choosing change when you don't have to, right? And that is a choice that you've really made, that since I've known you, you and I have both made choices to receive support, which is very challenging for both of us.
So hard for me.
I help other people. I don't need help, right? And you and I have both really dug our feet in on that, right? And really learned how to need support, how to receive support, and then how to come back for more. Right. Yep. And not check the person off the list and say well, I already cried to John last week, so I can't call him again. Who else is on my list? Because of course I can call you again. And I have, and we have that kind of relationship where I can tell you, I need to talk to you about something funny or sad or help me, or I don't know what to do. And we can have a full text conversation or phone conversation or Zoom conversation. And every once in a while we get to see each other in person and have a hug. Which is the best. But we didn't have to choose that, right? That's sort of the second side of this is, this episode in our talk today is really about the changes that are happening, right? And some of those changes are happening just because they're happening. And some of those changes are happening because we chose one thing, which snowballed into something else.
Right.
And so we have to keep changing. There's we already made the choice to change. So if someone's listening to this and they hear for themselves, oh my gosh, my boss just changed. They're not giving me a raise. I have to move soon. I have to do this. My parent needs care. Whatever's happening in our lives that we have to react to. What advice would you give to somebody who's what do I do with all this change?
I think we all have a very different experience around change, but I think, let me just share some thoughts from my perspective and my experience. When there's lots of change happening in the world and in my life, I tend to feel untethered. I tend to feel like I'm not grounded. So what's really, really important to me is when I begin to have that feeling, regardless of the level of change, I need to immediately take some time to myself and either ground myself through meditation, through journaling, through taking a hot bath, to doing something that's going to kind of get me back in my soul and in my body. So I need to not feel untethered, not feel like I'm kind of in a hot air balloon and kind of totally at effect of something. So bringing things back into myself is a really, really, it's the first thing that I do. And then the next thing that I do is really think about what are all the changes that are happening, and and just doing the next thing. I'm often someone who also gets really easily overwhelmed with things because I tend to see the 30,000 foot view as opposed to being able to say, okay, what's the right next thing that I need to do? What's the next thing, the most immediate thing? And I can see a long to-do list, and like my need to see all that stuff checked off is really, really important to me. And so I think, the two things that the three things I would say is, one, ground yourself, whatever that looks like, whatever kind of self-care back to being practice you need to take it. The second is to think about what the right next thing to do is. And then the third, which maybe should come second, is choosing how you want to be in this change. It's a choice, and you get to choose. Even if everything in your body, even if every instinct is to do something, you get to choose something different. And I think that's so important. And we talk about this all the time in our conversations, is choice. And it's so core to living the life we want to live. But it's really challenging sometimes because sometimes you don't feel like we can make a choice. Sometimes we're bound by previous choices or patterns that we made. And taking responsibility for our life and making a choice can be very new and unsettling to certain people. And so that's what I would say. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with all of your points. I think, for me, what comes in grounding and in coming sort of back to my body, which sounds very like ethereal, but is, we sort of dissociate from ourselves when we're wrapped up in what everybody else needs.
Totally.
So coming back to me and asking, like, where do I fit in this story? Am I the main character in my story, or am I a supporting character for everybody else? And then deciding, okay, this change is happening whether I want it or not. Where do I fit into the story? Feels really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the thing I instantly forget. When I go into my automatic way of being, I look at what everybody else needs around me.
Yeah.
And I pull my oxygen mask down last, right? For the old airport relational story. But see how I said relational story and I didn't say metaphor or analogy? It's like my brain has convinced me I don't know, so I shouldn't say the words at all. But it's remaining in choice. Things are going to happen to us. Things are going to change around us, whether we want them to or not. And sometimes they're really welcome changes, but we can't forget that we get to keep choosing along the way. And if we made a choice that we're not happy with, we can choose again. It doesn't have to be like, well, I've chosen my path for the rest of my life. I may as well walk the plank and dive off. So, so that's sort of, is for me, is stay in choice. Remember, you are the main character. John, I could talk to you about this all day.
All day. There's so much more I want to say about this too. So.
I know. Well, we're going to have a second episode about this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about when you are choosing, not because something's happening, but when you are choosing and how to sort of put into practice the different ways to choose when you don't actually have to.
Love it.
Thank you so much for being with us. We love to hear from you. If you know about analogies and metaphors, feel free to email us. If you've got questions or topic ideas, feel free to email us at ICould-talk-to-you-all-day@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time.
See ya. We're so grateful you decided to be with us during this episode. Subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and join us next time for more Real Talk.